Hi, good afternoon to you all. Let me try to set up this thing. Am I audible? Okay. I'm so happy to be here. Takriti is, I really liked it. Especially like 14 years ago, I remember here, but although the campus looks pretty different from back. So 2003 Takriti, it was a very happy time for me. As I was traveling here, I came via Delhi. I attended TRIST in IIT Delhi too. And back then, I thought like I was like young and crazy. I thought I was in Delhi anyway. Let me meet the president of that time. So I walked up to Rashtrapati Bhavan, wrote a letter about like all the things that I was doing, and wanted to meet President Kalam, who was president that time. And crazy enough, the next day I got a call that the president wanted to meet me. That was another craziest thing that just happened 2 days before. Like I was to come to Tekriti here. Amazing day over back then. So I like when I think of Tekriti, I remember that day. And again, like in Tekriti here, like I presented a robotics idea back then. And that became my company now. So it is a lot of like association I draw. And so there's a lot of very good feeling I have here to IIT Kanpur Takriti here. So today I want to talk about patterns in world history. So just like I drew a pattern like from 14 years ago to now, so I want to use this talk to draw patterns in world history, because history is about getting like understanding the past so that we can understand the future. Because unless we understand the past, we cannot look at like how we can move in the future. So this talk is about how we can learn inferences from the past throughout our entire great human history, and what are these patterns that keep occurring, and how we can use them. So one of the first patterns that I'm quite excited about is the geographical impact on history. So we are a lot impacted by the geography around us. For instance, the Indus Valley civilization. So Indus Valley civilization was among the greatest of that time. And in fact, even today, in many parts of India, we don't have that kind of planning that existed in the Indus Valley civilization. And when you think of other civilizations, like Egyptian civilization, you think of these big pyramids, but fairly useless things for people. Like think of like who gets benefited from these big pyramids. So it's more of like when you see those big monuments, it reflects upon the society. What kind of society it was. Like it's more autocratic society is the one that would build these big monstrous things that is of no use to people. On the other hand, what all things that Indus Valley civilization stood for? Things like drainages, things like roads, things like standardized bricks. And in the entire Indus Valley that like almost existed half of the subcontinent today, there were only two types of bricks that were there. That remarkable standardization. And there were also great councils. Looks to be the whole organization was much more democratic. Councils were there, and then so there were the thing people like we know about Indus Valley civilization were like this great bath that people relaxed. So rather than having big pyramids or things, we see roads, we see great pottery, we see great baths and so on. All these practical things. So that great civilization that was like way ahead of its time, and that ended. So there are a lot of theories that came about, but one of the most theories that came up recently was there was a 200-year drought in that time period. 200 years of extremely low rainfall during that time, and even the greatest civilization of that time could not withstand what happened, and then got destroyed. So there is a lot of theories that go into what caused the drought. Like as a part of it is like the people's mismanagement of water. So when a society starts abusing its water, the society falls. we can see that what happens to Ganga in the last century. So we abused water, and then the civilization got abused. So the civilizations that abuse water, that do not pay enough importance to water, they die. So partly that's what happened to the Indus Valley civilization. They mismanaged their water resources, but partly because there is a research going on a pattern called the Bond event. Bond event is something that was found out about like 10-15 years ago. So they found these patterns that occur every 1,500 years. Every 1,500 years, there is a change, a substantial change in the climatic patterns that cause a big strain on civilizations. So this research, especially, it was very attractive to me. Like it came from the NASA, and this research. So they went through these various time periods and looked at how these change in climate happened. And one such thing was destroyed the Indus Valley civilization. And Indus Valley civilization was not the only one to be destroyed back then. Almost all the Bronze Age civilizations, they all had this significant drop. Whether it is in the Greeks' Bronze Age civilization, but Greeks also had a Bronze Age civilization before they had the Aristotle and all those, like 1,000 years before then. There was this Bronze Age civilization that was thought to be a myth until about 50-60 years ago. There's this whole Bronze Age culture that was destroyed. Again, in Egypt there was a discontinuity. In the Middle East there was a discontinuity. So what happened in Indus Valley civilization was not specific to Indus Valley civilization alone. Across the world, civilization collapsed in this massive global climatic change. So that was like Bond event 6. So there's every 1,500 years such an event occurs. And then when you look at like the Bond event that occurred after the Indus Valley civilization, so that was when like India was at its high heights in the Gupta era, like about 4th to 5th century AD. By then the Indus Valley civilization had been destroyed, the population movement occurred, and then there is a second civilization that was more centered around this area, Uttar Pradesh. So that just grew up. The Mauryan Empire came in, and then Kushanas came in, and so on. So there is this like steady increase in the civilization occurred, and its height was the Gupta Empire around 5th century AD. So in this Gupta Empire, again, India looked to be a fairly invincible thing, like extremely strong army, extremely very good development in all areas of endeavor, whether it is in art, whether it is in sciences, in literature. But then again, that empire too died. So there was the next Bond event occurred. This time it especially hit the Central Asia. So when it hit the Central Asia, massive amount of famines there occurred, pushing out tribes from into all sorts of directions. So one group of tribes, the Hunas, started keeping on attacking the borders of India. The Gupta Empire kept on trying to keep them in check, but eventually the Gupta Empire gave up trying, and so the Gupta Empire ended. And in parallel, the Roman Empire was also brought by their cousins. The Hunas had their cousins, the Huns, and then the Huns sort of brought an end to the Roman Empire. Same thing happened to the Chinese Empire with the Huns, and then also happened with the Sassanid dynasty in Iran. So it's a sort of this parallel thing. So it's like the fall of Gupta, the fall of Rome is not as this isolated event, but this thing came from Central Asians who pushed in all four directions, brought to end these great empires, the heights of Rome, the heights of Gupta Empire, the Sassanid Empire in Iran, and then in China. So this massive shift. So this, like when we talk about the history, we cannot be talking about this individual things alone. What is this broad pattern that occurred? And once this thing happened by around 5th century or 6th century AD, this massive fall and massive chaos, because all these big empires have gone out. And that was a time when this chaos was at this peak most, where Prophet Muhammad was able to offer some kind of consolidation starting from Arabia, and then he was able to set it up like across Persia towards the border of Europe, and to India, because there was this massive power vacuum that occurred throughout that region as the Central Asians destroyed the major power structures then. And this was also the time Hinduism became a dominant religion in Southeast Asia again. So in the Southeast Asia, some of this major civilization in Indonesia and other places collapsed, and this was a time when Hinduism again became a dominant force in the Southeast Asian thing, because so it was again filling up the vacuum. So then this next bond event occurred around 1500 to 1700 AD time frame. So this was the bond event. It's called the last Little Ice Age. So the Little Ice Age is a period of time when again global temperature reduced by about 3-4 degrees, especially in the northern hemisphere, and then it's caused a drastic change in patterns, the rainfall patterns, especially if you look at the last few decades of the Mughal dynasty. So until about 1700, the rainfalls were much more predictable in India. From about 1700, there was massive changes in the rainfall patterns, and suddenly the famines started occurring at much more intervals than it occurred in the past, possibly linked to this Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age hit not just India, but civilizations around the world. But it was in India that like a big chunk of this weakening of the Mughal Empire happened, partly because of the famines, because India is such a big agricultural-centric civilization. As this famines started occurring much more, there was chaos, and this chaos was exploited by the East India Company. But then when they took over, they had no clue of what was happening to, because this massive famines started occurring much more. This thing, and they were so clueless, they actually exacerbated the whole thing. So famines occurred even more in numbers during the 1700 time frame. But you can also look at these famines across the world. Like you can look at what happened in Ireland, for instance, with their potato famines and so on, moving the Irish people across different parts, including the North America. So why Irish settled a lot in North America, and how their culture spread out, like has a lot of influence on this potato famine. And in general, there is a big push of Europeans that occurred in the 1700s because of these famines that was spread around the world. So just like the Central Asians who moved around from about 400 AD, the Europeans had to be pushed out. So in Germany and in a lot of places, they moved around the world, and that has a big impact on the colonization. And also in parallel, there was also, just like in India, there were also big famines in Peru and in other parts of the Latin America. Again, weakening the civilizations, getting it ready for a colonization. So again, when we look at colonization, it was not an isolated event. Just like the Central Asians did, like 1400 years before them, the Europeans just were pushed out by this massive change in patterns, and then were able to take out big chunk of the world. So these patterns keep occurring, and one of these most important patterns occurred around 12,000 about 12,000 years ago. So with the so that is this start of this the last this thing period, the Holocene period. So that is when this change in pattern, like the previous thing was called this Ice Age. So this Ice Age was a period from about 130,000 years ago until about 12,000 years ago. So when the humans came to the world was like warmer like this. And the first 60,000, 70,000 years of the human's history was much more like quite normal, considering the overall thing. So we were like in a very small number. We are a very insignificant species. A few thousand people stuck somewhere in East Africa. So that was who we are. We were not like world dominators or anything. So we were stuck somewhere in this probably like 10,000, 15,000 people, and around that time some of this big population booms. But that's about it. But then there was this the Ice Age that occurred around 130,000 years ago. So world there was a drastic cooling that occurred. When this drastic cooling occurred, there is climatic change happened. So like rainfall patterns changed. So those areas that we are used to seeing this lush greenery, they became really barren land. So as humans were pushed, so we were, one of the things that makes humans really significant is our endurance. So we are not stronger than other animals. We don't have a sharper vision than other animals. We cannot fly like other animals. But one thing that is very, very important about our species is we have endurance, remarkable amount of endurance. A tiger really, goes to hunt and, run fast like 1 to 2 kilometers, but it would struggle to be like us, to have endurance, to have this energy spread out really, really long periods of time, we do. So this it really, really enduring humans. We moved from East Africa because of this ice age, and we kept looking for various places for food. And we were helped by the fact that because of this ice age, the water levels, or the ocean water levels dropped. So just global warming is increasing the water levels now. So the water levels the global cooling decreased the water levels so significantly that almost the entire world was connected. So these islands that we see now, like in Australia or this whole Americas, there were land bridges to them because the water levels were significantly lower. So just like how the global warming is causing a submergence of many lands, the global cooling caused the other way around. So there are many parts of the present day ocean that were actually land. Uh, so this global cooling afforded the human race with a great possibility. We could go all around the world. We went and slowly moved around. Came to India. We went to East Asia, and then we walked all over. Came to the Americas. We walked into Australia and so on. So we could almost walk all around the world. And that happened for more than 1 lakh years, until about 12,000 years ago. The 12,000 years ago, this ice age ended, and then this drastic warming occurred, and this warming continues to this day. That worsened by the human thing, but there is a steady pattern of warming that has been occurring over the last 12,000 years. So this warming part trapped a lot of humans. So this warming part meant that ocean levels started increasing from about 12,000 years ago. As this ocean levels started increasing, a lot of these the humans were used to walking into Australia or the Americas. Those were all gone. So the humans sort of got trapped in the North America, in the Americas, in Australia, and so on. So for about 10,000, 12,000 years, the species and the humans who got there, they got stuck. So they were not able to contact with the rest of the world, partly because the global warming occurred. And then this global warming also helped in a lot of other ways. In that for the Australians and the Americans, it was a bad thing, but for the rest of us, it was a good thing, because the climate change also prompted the rise of agriculture. So because of this change in water patterns and all, a few group of humans started gathering around a few areas where there is a lot of abundant water. One of these areas is this region called this Fertile Crescent, between Israel and Turkey. So in that region, a few people with sufficient enough density, they started exploring, taking this wild seeds and started planting, and they found out that because of this changed climatic pattern, because of with enough warmth, the seeds started sprouting, and they could get food right near where they lived. They need not go and hunt somewhere. And as they probably most likely women who managed that. So early women, they constantly tried experimenting with various seeds around their garden. That gave rise to this agriculture. And agriculture is a significant thing for the humankind. So normally human requires about a square mile of forest. If we are living in the forest and we depend on the forest for food, like a single human needs about a square mile of forest. That is the level we need. Like if we have to hunt animals and so on, that much land we required. But with agriculture, a single square mile could support hundreds of people. So now instead of being pressurized in the early humans, even having 70, 80 people in a tribe was a big was considered a big enough population, because the tribe cannot support more than 70, 80 people, because each person requires that much land to survive. But with agriculture, we could live in thousands, tens of thousands of people even. because now we were able to produce enormous amount of food. So this is called a civilization. So civilization doesn't mean like we are better in some way or the civilization means large enough concentration of people. So instead of previous ways of like depending on the forest where we could support very very small population, now even having hundreds or thousands of people in a tribe, it is not considered overpopulated. So there is this because of the thing that afforded by the agricultural revolution that occurred about 12,000 years ago. So this agricultural revolution possibly moved eventually into India and other places. And again, when you look at crops that we see around Eurasia, almost any crop that you see in one part, it has spread all over the Eurasian continent. If you look at rice, it's probably was domesticated first in China, but Indians, we use rice as much as anyone else. Same thing, wheat, it was first domesticated somewhere in Turkey, but we use it as much as. So this globalization that we talk about was there even then. So we were able to take these ideas from different parts of the world and then able to make it our own. That's so many of these crops are so common all across the Eurasian thing. So this Eurasia, stretching from all the way from Spain to like the eastern part of Asia, say Japan, it is considered this one block. Especially Jared Diamond, who was famous book Guns, Germs and Steel. So it defines this whole thing as this big geographical block that also is a cultural block. There's also this innovation block, because anything that is like discovered in Spain or like in China, it would eventually get into the other parts, because there is this common landmass that connected this whole thing. So that is how whether it is agriculture, whether it is metals, whether it is the wheel, whether it is the domesticated animals, almost all of these things that we take it for granted because this spread over. But if you are like a native Australian or this native American, all of these things would be quite new because you are not connected to the Eurasian thing. So one reason why the Native Americans did not, like for instance, use the wheel. Actually, they invented the wheel like in their own way, but they used it for toys. They didn't use it for locomotion. The primary reason is they didn't have, if they are done for locomotion, what would pull the wagon? Let's say they put the wheels in a wagon, what would pull the wagon? In Eurasia, we take that answer for granted. There will be something to pull that wagon, like you would have ox, you would have the horse, you would have like probably like some place even elephant that would pull the wheel. What would pull the wheel in the Americas? There was no animal to do that. No animal that was, and same thing in most of Africa, same thing in Australia. So the reason why those cultures did not invent the wheel, because there was nothing in it for them to pull the cart if they had made it. So they got not bothered about it. Same thing with metals. Again, like Eurasia was the center of like building all great metal works, possibly because we also had a great pan-Eurasian trade. So for instance, to make this Bronze Age civilization, we make a big deal out of this Bronze Age civilization that occurred. Because bronze requires two different materials to make, copper and tin. And interestingly, these two are not found in the same place in the world. So copper is found in one part of the world, like Afghanistan, other places during that time. And tin is found in places like Spain. So these are like, so well spread out, like, this copper and tin. And you needed both of these to come together to make bronze. So this Bronze Age civilization is so significant, not because bronze is a great material, as bronze is a great material, but more importantly because it generated this need for trade. The trade network that developed all the way from Spain to East Asia to trade copper and tin to make this great material called bronze. So that was one of this great push for globalization, because we needed to build those trade networks. The Middle Easterners especially made a great use of it. Because on one side was this, like, the European cultures that was making tin. Another side was this Asian cultures making copper. And they were in the middle of this trade network. And greatly they had access to this technology from both sides as this trade network spread. And this was partly killed by iron. So unlike the bronze, the iron had a few different properties. Now iron, it requires mastering lot more heat than bronze, because higher melting point. But irons one of the strong points was it was available almost everywhere in the world, and you don't need to require you don't need a trade network at all to build iron, because like you can take the iron ore. If you are able to manage that much heat, you can generate iron right out there. So one part of the reason why the Iron Age India moved, like, so the Indian civilization was much more concentrated in the Indus. At least that's what we believe. So from Indus it moved to the Ganges, the Indian civilization all. So because we required the trade network when we were in the Indus Valley, we required the trade network that connected all the way through the Europe, because making bronze required the trade network. But when we got to iron, we didn't require the trade network at all. So when we moved, like the civilization center slowly tipped into the Ganga, we never required the trade network. So India could like mostly close its borders, because from the Ganga you cannot trade easily from to outside India. That was not required. So you were able to protect a much more relatively close civilization, and were able to grow from there. That was afforded by iron, because we didn't need that great trade network. And that also means a huge collapse all over the world occurred around that time, because the iron did not require this trade network. So bunch of cultures that were dependent on this trade got collapsed. So a lot of this break in globalization occurred after bronze went out of that thing again. So when we talk about especially the historians use a lot of references from the Vedas. When they think of Vedas, there is a lot of fire element involved in it. Agni is such a central element to the whole Vedic culture. So one reason, for good or bad, like we connect the Vedic civilization to Iron Age, is because iron required a huge amount of mastering the fire. So when it and the Vedic civilization again at its center around here. So the connection that the historians often make is Indians were pioneers in iron, by the way. So we made this earliest of this great steel, and we talk about a lot of this Agni. So it is probably because we were trying to master that fire, because that mastering that fire was this key to controlling iron. And once we were able to control iron, we no longer dependent on the Middle Easterners. We were able to create our own strong independent civilization with less of connections to the outside world, probably. So that is, and again when we talk about why the population of India and China is so big. So the question shifts back to the agriculture. So why these two cultures had so much more population than almost any other place in the world? So when you look at the water map of this world, I mean, water is such a great thing that we take it for granted. There are only about 16, 17 great river systems around the world, river valley basins they are called. So there are only about 16 or 17. Of the 16 or 17, about 8 or 9 are stuck in places that are not easily reachable. Like in Russia, they have 3 or 4. Like Canada has 2 and 3. Then there is this great Congo river basin that is stuck in the middle of a great rainforest, and same thing with Amazon. So there are only about 7 or 8 major river basins that are not surrounded by these great inaccessible things like big rainforests or this polar regions. Of this 7 or 8, India and China got 4. So India's got the Indus and the Ganga. So again, the China has got the 2, Yangtze and Fujian. So the Yangtze especially again it's the equivalent of our Ganga, the building that civilization. So both the Yangtze and Hangu, they both created that civilization. So when you look at these 8 great river basins that are not that are not inaccessible. Of these, half of this is in our 2 civilizations, and the rest 4 they again built this great civilization outside, like the Nile basin, the Tigris-Euphrates basin that built the Mesopotamian civilization. Same thing with the Rhine basin that built a lot of the Europe, and then the Mississippi. So these are just the 4 things that are outside. So this 8 great river basins that are in accessible zones, 4 are in India and China. So that is one big reason why India and China are so much more populated than anywhere, because water is so much essential, especially when you're talking about this in this habitable zone. There is a lot of water in Russia, there is a lot of water in Canada, but too cold. But when you look at this habitable zone, so when you keep going into the west of India in the same zone, a big chunk of it is a desert. Like all the way to Mexico, if you go over that thing, lot of thing in the same latitude. If you go over, a big chunk of it is a desert. We are not a desert. So one of the things that supported our civilization so much is this, because of this water, and that's the reason why we celebrate our rivers so much, because without the rivers we are nothing. So this rivers is a so much central element of our civilization, because that is one that's supporting all this great population. And second, that is more fascinating, especially about the Ganga over here, it carries more silt than any other river in the world. So that's why that this supports more population than any other river in the world, because this carries more silt. And that is because the Himalayas is this one of the newest mountains, and so Himalayas could be easily eroded. And so from this Himalayas, the Ganges carries so much more silt. Like think of comparison to Amazon. Amazon river is so much more massive than the Ganga when it comes to water. But when it comes to silt, it carries only a fraction of what Ganga carries. So while Ganga makes this massive delta, and so the world's largest delta is made by the Ganga, world's largest alluvial plain is made by Ganga. But when you think of Amazon, almost nothing. Very small delta and very small plain. So both the world's largest delta and the world's largest alluvial plain, that is provided by the Ganga, and that's why Ganga is so celebrated, because there is no other river like Ganga when it comes to this growing this civilization. So in other civilization, when you think of great fertile lands, so like for instance the Egyptian civilization, anything that you put a seed, if you throw a seed near the Nile, it will just grow. So that's sort of how fertile that is. But the Nile's, the whole plain is just about 10 kilometers from the Nile River itself. If you go just little more than 10 kilometers from the Nile River, all you reach is the desert. So that is the width of that the Nile's plain that is created. When you think of the Ganga's plain, you can go all the way from Ganga and the Indus. If you put both of them together, you can go all the way from the borders of Pakistan, and then go to the northeast India and hit Brahmaputra and put a seed anywhere, and that will grow. So like in Nile, we talk about like 10-20 kilometer region. In India, talking about like 2,000 kilometer region where such a massive fertile thing exists. So that's why, like, although we are just the 7th largest country in the world, in terms of the agricultural land, total fertile land that we are like, so we are tied up with the US for the #1 spot. That much. So US has 3.5 times more land, but a lot of that land is fairly useless. But we have that much land. Nearly like 2/3 of our country is an agricultural land that is afforded by this amazingly great water systems, the Indus and the Ganga. They not just provide water at a crucial thing, but they also provide that great amount of silt. And India, in India's case, it is even more lucky in that there are also dozens of other smaller river civilization, river systems like the Godavari, the Narmada, the Kaveri, and so on. And each of them, they build their own civilizations therein. So this is again like a question of why the North Indian empires were able to be more consolidated, while in the South India there was no this South Indian empire that came out. South India had always this dozens of different cultures, because in the North India the Ganga is pretty much this one big river to which every other water system connects to, whether it is the Yamuna or the Gomati or Sarayu or anything. Almost everything fall into the Ganga. So the North India is just one system. There is this massive system going on. So that's why in the North India, like you could like have the empire builders, ambitious empire builders, could run all the way from Delhi to Calcutta. They could build these political parties even now. So why they want to put in the center in Varanasi? Why Modi chose Varanasi? The center, like of this great the Ganga River, because once you control that, you can control this large region that happened to the Gupta Empire, the Mauryan Empire, and so on. But when it comes to the south, there are 10 independent river systems The Krishna and Godavari, they form one system. They don't mix in Kaveri anywhere. The Kaveri does not mix into Narmada anywhere. These are all like completely independent systems. That's why like completely independent cultures and completely independent empires grew in the south. So the south, it was very very hard to consolidate. Um, and even today, south has this multiple political systems, multiple linguistic systems that fights to be independent. Whereas north, it's all this one river system. So when you think about history, think about the geography underneath it, because it is the geography over which we build all of this. Again, like why India among the few civilizations that has had among the fewest conquests. So when you, again, like there is a myth that India is among the most conquered. It's India is among the least conquered. When it comes to this way. So think of Alexander. He was able to take everything from Greece all the way, and he came to the borders of India and what is like present day Pakistan. So he didn't cross the Indus. Pretty much like his army had to turn back from Indus, and this is a pattern that we see with all other great conquerors. Before Alexander, there was this Darius. Again, Darius was able to. They were able to threaten Greece that was so far away, but they were not able to come into India that was just right next to them. Persia was such a powerful empire, but they were not able to cross Indus and come over here. They went all the way to Greece, threatening like the movie 300, like the Xerxes was able to threaten Greece that was so far away, but they were not able to threaten the land just right next to them, because like this Indus is such a impenetrable thing. Same thing happened to Genghis Khan. Again, Genghis Khan had a little bit of thing like crossing the Indus, and that's it. So he was like said like let's come back to it later, and he was never able to come back. So we were a empire that was able to stop the greatest of the world's conquerors. Same thing with the caliphates that came after Muhammad. They were able to conquer almost everything. They got into Europe, they got into Africa. But then when you look at their borders, they always stop in the Indus. The great caliphates that Abbasid, Fatimid, and all those caliphates that were there, they all stopped over here. So there is this something so magical. So when it comes to this great conquerors, whether it's the Mongols, whether it is the great Achaemenids of the Persian, there's the great Greeks, we don't let them in. So the way to conquer India is to either get into India already through for some other thing, or at least get to the borders of India and slowly keep pushing into it. So the best way to attack is from India, from inside India. So that's what the Europeans did it so perfectly. Like they were already here for 200 years, so they were as much as good as the. So they were able to attack from inside the Trojan horse. But because you cannot win this land from that easily from the outside. Over thousands of years, these invasions that we talk about them is because they were so few. If you're talking about the Middle Eastern history, and you cannot talk about the invasions at all because there are so many to talk about. So the invasion is the norm there, whereas invasion is such an aberration over here. So that is one reason why India has had such a cultural continuity, at least for the last 3,500 years. But as we know much more about the Indus Valley civilization, probably we had a similar culture for more than 5,000 years. Indus Valley, when we take out those symbols again, it has the same cow, the cow and the ox, the ox, and then the elephant and the people tree and all those things. So pretty much they valued the similar things as so in terms of the cultural continuity, at least for 3,500 years we are sure that we had a similar culture. And if you had the Indus Valley civilization to probably 5,000 to 6,000 years of remarkable cultural continuity that no other part of the world can boast of. That is afforded by sorry. Okay, so that is afforded by this great geographical thing. On one side there is this Indus forming that on the other side there is this Himalayas, and on the south is this great ocean. So pretty much it's a impenetrable fortress that is hard to conquer. On the other hand, think of the Middle East. Even today, Middle East, the problem is they don't have such a mountain range. They don't have such a great ocean in the middle to actually protect it. So there is this both the advantage and disadvantage. The advantage is, since there are no barriers, it became a great zone for trade. All the way from Europe to India, there is this massive trade zone through the Middle East, because it is mostly flat. Again, like Iran has its own mountains and all, but relative to the the Himalayas and others, it is much more flat. Like an Alexander could easily cross in a couple of years and cross over, because it's mostly flat. And so that is good in a way, like, because that's how the trade routes work. But it is also bad in a way, because they were constantly in fight, constantly in war. For instance, what is happening in Syria, so the present day ISIS. But this same thing has been occurring for thousands of years. This is nothing new. About 3,500 years ago, there was a war between two Middle Eastern powers. One was this Mitanni kingdom, and other was this Hittite kingdom from the Hattusha. So these two empires, like roughly present day Turkey and Iraq, when these two empires fought, they made a treaty at the end. That treaty was one of the most interesting things. I mean, the fight is like usual, like it happens. But there's something interesting about the treaty, because that treaty is where we find the first archaeological mention of the Vedic gods. So the treaty was named was written in the name of Mitra and Indra and Varuna. So the treaty has all those things, okay, in the name of Mitra, because Mitra is the god of treaties. So for instance, one reason why we named our product as Mitra is because Mitra is one of the oldest of this known Indian gods that is there, because Mitra was the god of treaties. Mitra was the god of contracts. So these two, the Mitanni kingdom and the Hittite kingdom, they both made a pact in the name of Mitra, and then they talk about Indra and Varuna and so on. So this clay tablet is still found in the London Museum, and this tablet is carbon dated. And so one reason why we talk about the Vedic Rig Vedas to be like 1500 BCE is because this tablet came around that time, 1500 BCE, 1300 to 1500 approximately, that period. So this is much more in talking in terms of the Vedic Vedic culture. And when you look at the Mitanni kingdoms, their king's name are all like more Sanskritian, or at least what we could recognize as present day Sanskrit, like Tushratar, Artatman, and so on. So these are pretty fascinating. Like there is two kingdoms between Iraq and Turkey fighting, and their names were like something that we could look at present day. Yeah, this is look much more Indian. And then again their treaty was named in the name of Mitra and Varuna and Indra and so on. So this fight that has been there going on in the Middle East. In Middle East was absorber of ideas from around the world. And since they don't have a natural barrier like Himalayas and the Indus that we have, they have been on a constant fighting path for thousands of years. And another interesting pattern about the Middle East is there is always this Persian Empire on one side, and there is a Western Empire on another side. So this story has been occurring for over 3,000 years, this great battle between the Persian side and then the Western side. So earlier it used to be the Greeks who were on the Western side, and the Persians, they fought this epic battles. Then after the Greeks came the Romans, and then there's massive battles for like 700, 800 years. These massive battles between the Romans and the Persians occurred. And then after this came the Arabs, and so there was this constant tension between the Arabs and the Persian. So there is this Persian version of Islam, and then there is Arab version of Islam. The Persian version of Islam is much more the Shiite version that we have, and then the Arab version is much more the Sunnite. But then these two, it is much more it's not just rooted in religion. It is much more rooted in the geopolitics that has been going on for a long time. And then came the Russians. So there was this great Russian Persian wars. Then there came the British, and then came the great British Persian wars, and now the Americans. So this war between the Persia and the Western power to rule the rest of the Middle East, that has been going on for a long time, because the geography is the same. And as long as the geography is the same, the history will also try to come back to it. And there are so when you look at few other civilizations that do not have enough boundaries, the same thing occurs in the northern European plain. So in the northern parts of Europe, like between Germany and France, so again there is this plains. There are not enough barriers on the middle part, central part. Switzerland is surrounded by the Alps, or at least it's on the Alps. But when it comes to the northern part of this thing, like between France and Germany on this side, there are hardly any barriers. So somebody can dream of taking from France all the way to Russia, because it's like straight flat land all the way. So that is one thing that like as per, brought the dreams of people like Napoleon and Hitler and so on, because this massive plain that extended all the way into Russia from France. You can go over, but not many people dreamed of taking Switzerland, because that had this natural barriers. So as long as a country does not have a proper natural barrier, it will be like stuck. It will be part of disputes it doesn't want to be. On the other hand, think of Japan. They are in the middle of nowhere. Nothing connects to them. So nobody, like other than the Mongols. Mongols tried it twice, and unluckily both of the times they faced this divine winds against them. But other than that, nobody bothered with them, because the geography provides that isolation. But if the geography does not provide that isolation, then like what happens in the northern parts of Europe, or what happens in the Middle East, you're screwed. You will be part of this massive power struggle. So this is one reason why, since the birth of Pakistan, India has this new like security headache. Because until then, the Indus River was that barrier. So beyond that, we didn't care much about like all those like an uncivilized tribes over there, like sitting over there. But once this Pakistan was created, we no longer have that natural barrier between us and the Western power. So because like Indus is running in the middle of them, and pretty much other than for instance in places like Punjab, it is like flat land, you can get over there. So that is one reason why we are fighting so much with Pakistan. Like historically, our empires have not fought that much with the outside power, because we didn't need to. We were properly secured, but then now we are increasingly engaged in wars again, because we don't have a natural boundary between them. So this is I could go on much more, but I'm already over time. But geography is so much important to how we live, how our history turned out. And since the geography is much more constant, history keeps repeating, because on the same thing over geography we fight it all. And so we have to look at the geographic part of the history and the geographic patterns. For instance, the bond events that keep recurring. Fortunately, we do at least for the next 600-700 years, we might not have something like a natural that is occurring. But again, we could create our own if the nature does not do it. Like we accelerate those processes, the climatic change processes. Climatic change is something that is so much natural to the world. Like world is always changing, but we are accelerating those climatic change patterns so much that the warming that occurred over 1,000 years, now we are able to make the same thing over 50-60 years. So that means those great disturbances that came out every 1,500 years, we will be getting it much more quicker cycles, and offering that much more interesting things to us. Thank you.
So now we will be having a few questions from sir. So hello sir. Sir, this is a question, like you said that earlier, and we all know that India was one of the leaders in the world and one of the greatest civilizations. After the Britishers conquered, we have fallen down, and we are quite left behind the civilizations which were once nothing, like the American civilization or so. So what do you consider the main reason for this, and how and do you see that the flip that had occurred in these 400 years, again we will rise up to that glory? Do you see that happening, and how will that happen, and how do you see us contributing in that?
So good question. So one of the things is we started declining even before the British Empire. So as I mentioned about the little ice age that was occurring, so British colonization came because we were falling. So not the other way around. So if we were really strong, British colonization would not have occurred. So we were already on a declining path when the British came, and then they made the bad thing really worse. So for instance, this great famines as they started occurring, they were not able to change the tax structures and all much more quickly with this thing. So this this thing worsened much more. And the more important thing occurred with the British that did not occur before. Our great cities were built in these rivers, like the Ganga. Like if you look at the ancient India cities, they were built either on the Indus or the Ganga or the rivers south. All these, river cities, cities like, Varanasi or the Allahabad and all those great cities. But once the British came, they wanted to take from the coast. So unlike all the empires before then, they built a empire from the coast. So they built these three new cities, the Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta, from the coast, and they slowly got into India from the coast. But there was a thing that that was a flip side of it. The coast got a lot of power, a lot of prosperity, and so on. But the interiors that came quite late into the British thing, that never got all this prosperity. So if you look at the metropolitan cities that the British built, three of them is in the south, the coastal thing, and only one, the New Delhi, is actually in this heartland of India. And even that came as an afterthought in 1911, when they realized that they didn't build any new city in this whole of northern India. Whereas in the south, we got like a lot of new cities that got built. When the northern India, which was like the core heart of India, nothing was built. That was one of the biggest things that happened in the British colonization. We don't talk about it. We talk about gold taken, silver taken. Now, India can survive some gold and silver taken, but what India could not survive is this great civilization center that completely left to decay. So for over 250 years, this region was left to decay without any city. So can you think of any new city that was built around this this whole core of it? There was almost nothing. Whereas in the south, Hyderabad or Bangalore or Chennai, Madras, and all those cities are new cities relative to Indian scale, but nothing got built. So that was the problem with how India fell much more faster. And the Indian great politicians, they never bothered about it either. Even after independence, like for instance, Punjab got Chandigarh again. Punjab was also a great growing region, and Orissa got Bhubaneswar and so on. So again, nothing was built in this whole stretch. The local politicians never cared to build this new great cities that was built with the latest technology. So that accelerated our downfall. But almost all empires fall. There is not a single empire in the world that has neither been conquered or nor have fallen. Like every civilization falls. Or like if you talk about 3,000, 4,000 years, everything falls. So this is like sort of like our we get sick. This was a sick time. So we are coming out of this sickness to improve, to get out of it fully. We have to build these new cities, great cities, at a remarkable pace. When we talk about ancient India, we are already talking about in cities in Prayag or this Mathura or this Varanasi and all those things. What have we built in the last 500 years? So this much 60-70% of India lies without these great cities. And so that's why the Delhi is so much more pressurized, because Delhi has to carry this burden of all these things. So we have to build great cities like our ancestors did in the past. New modern cities, dozens of them, probably like hundreds. And that is how India will come back into it. And India will come back sooner or later, but we can accelerate its rise if we build new great cities.
Hello? Yeah, hi. So, you say that India is impenetrable. So, what about Muhammad Ghazni, who looted us like 17 times? What about Mughals, who came in and took over for almost most of the time? And there are numerous other examples like Nadir Shah, Muhammad.
So when it comes to Nadir Shah or the early Ghauri Ghaznavid, so we're talking more about bandit style things. So they sort of raided. So not invasion. So they came over. They took civilizations can have robbers on the periphery. Doesn't mean that
So the Mughals were clearly not robbers.
Right? Yeah, and that I didn't mean Mughals in that. Today I specifically mentioned those three. So the Mughals were a more of a different kind of thing. So once you are in the India subcontinent already, so they already grew up on the subcontinent, especially the Afghanistan part of it. So once you are already there and then grow it over there, it is easier. So sort of you're already broken the periphery and then growing. Same thing happened to the East India Company too. So already they were there in the subcontinent. and then they were able to attack it. For us, if you are like, coming from China or Greece or from somewhere outside, you cannot get in. But if you are already into the subcontinent already, that's why like, Afghanistan is such an important country. Like even today, like India pays a lot of attention to the Afghanistan because it is in the periphery of the subcontinent. If you are slowly growing from Afghanistan you can attack over India because it's part of the same subcontinent.
So you mentioned an age when you said that the reverse of global warming happened, and because of that the sea level went down and a lot of land bridges came across and humans were able to travel from islands and other. So I was wondering if that might be the scientific reason how Ram Bhagwan actually crossed to Lanka.
I have no clue on that part, But one thing that is pretty interesting is when the other way happened, when the warming started about 12,000 years ago, this massive floods occurred. This massive floods that submerged all these low-lying areas, creating this islands. So that is again in our epics, around epics, almost all the great civilization. It is called this Great Flood. This Great Flood is a part of like Indian religions too. So this and then it is part of the Christianity. It is part of the Middle Eastern thing. So I don't know about how to connect Ramayana with that thing, but at least we know historically that this 12,000 years ago this great flooding that occurred. That is a part of lot of our religion, whether it's Noah's boat when it comes to the Abrahamic religions, or in our own thing. So the Kalki, submerging everything, and then we are coming out of it. So a lot of these things, the Great Flood is a big part of that, and that is connected to the flooding.
Hello, sir. Hello. I have basically two questions. First is, how the creation of Pakistan has hindered the growth of northern India. Like when we go to South India, we have sea routes for trades, but because of creation of Pakistan, that trade routes were blocked. This is my first question. Second question is more general. Like I'm an avid follower of you on Quora. So what is the secret of your vast knowledge? Like and like how much time every day do you spend reading, and what are your sources basically?
I'll take the first question better. So India needs Pakistan and Pakistan needs India. So we need between this language, this culture, that culture. So in Pakistan, in a sort of a way, it unites India, because whenever there is a war that comes out, the whole India unites. So same thing happened in the 90s. Like 90s was a period of lot of disturbance, massive amount of rioting and all those things. So India was starting to getting fractured. That's when in the 90s all those regional parties started occurring. So India's existence was under threat. The terrorism started in Kashmir, and then there was disturbance in 80s. If you take through the Rajiv Gandhi's period, threat south and so on. So this idea of India was getting really fractured, because it was 20-25 years since we fought the last time in the 80s. But then in 90s throughout, it was the India's existence was getting weakened, and 1999 came this great war with Pakistan. So whenever India needs it, Pakistan attacks us. So then suddenly everything united, and then it was a rise of national parties. So until 99, it was as those regional parties were the ones that were going to rule India, because the previous 10 years was all the rule by regional parties. Then once 1999 Pakistan attacked, now we were back to being a nation again. So in a way, India needs Pakistan to keep us. Remember, okay, we are in one nation. So that they remind us. But the bad thing is, the significant bad thing is they disconnected us from the West Asia and the Middle East. So Middle East was such an important region for India throughout, especially Afghanistan, Persia, because that's where we traded a lot. That's with whom we had exchanged a lot of culture and materials. But Pakistan sits right between us and the Middle East. So this great ancient connection between us and Afghanistan and Persia and all those things are blocked by Pakistan. So that is one of the big negative points that occurred. Again, this wars and all those things are also there. But the big negative point I would say is the disconnection between India and the Middle East. So the trade routes are such an important part. Why? Like because the empires that can control trade routes, they live longer. The empires that do not control trade routes, they die. So we are no longer able to control the trade routes, and that's a big problem with Pakistan.
Due to time constraint, we won't be taking any more questions. So I request Mr. Deepu Philip to just kindly give the token of appreciation to Mr. Balaji Viswanathan.
Thank you.
Photo. Okay. Really, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will be starting with the panel discussion on future warfare in a few moments. I request everybody to kindly settle down.